The room was quiet, except for the low hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. The SEAL team sat around the long, metal table, faces tense but focused. Each of them had trained for years for situations like this, but even seasoned soldiers could feel the weight of what lay ahead. On the large screen at the front of the room, a map of the dense jungle flickered under the dim light. Lines, dots, and coordinates marked the location of their target, a high-ranking insurgent leader who had eluded capture for months. Command had emphasized the importance of this mission. If they failed, countless lives could be at risk. The team leader, a man known for his calm demeanor and sharp instincts, stood in front of them, holding a laser pointer. He moved it across the map with precision, explaining the approach. The terrain was difficult. Thick foliage, muddy paths, and hidden ravines made it nearly impossible to navigate without alerting the enemy. The insurgents' camp was well defended, and intelligence suggested that they were expecting some sort of attack. "Remember," the leader said, his voice steady but carrying an edge of urgency. "We're going into their territory. No backup. No easy way out. We rely on our skills, on each other, and on staying invisible until the right moment." The words hung in the air. The room was silent, each team member absorbed in their thoughts, picturing the mission in their minds. They had trained for countless scenarios, but the unknown always carried a weight that no training could fully prepare them for. Outside the room, helicopters waited, engines humming quietly, ready to take them into the heart of the jungle. But for now, they were here, inside, reviewing every detail, every contingency. Each SEAL had a role, a responsibility. One of them checked his weapon, fingers tracing the cold metal with practiced familiarity. Another studied the map, memorizing every curve of the terrain, every tree line, every potential hiding spot. The navigator tapped her pen against the table, calculating possible routes in her mind, anticipating obstacles before they happened. Every person in the room knew that this mission would test their endurance, their intelligence, and their ability to remain calm under pressure. Even in such a tense moment, small gestures of camaraderie appeared. One of the younger SEALs cracked a tiny smile, sharing a brief glance with a teammate. It was a subtle acknowledgement, a way of saying, "We've got this," without words. In a situation like this, trust was everything. Every life depended on the team working together, on each member anticipating the other's moves, on unspoken communication that came only from hours of training and shared experience. The briefing continued. The team learned about the enemy's strength, their known positions, and their patterns. They were told about possible ambush points, traps hidden in the underbrush, and the most dangerous paths through the jungle. The team leader emphasized staying silent, moving with caution, and using the environment to their advantage. Even a single misstep could alert the enemy, and in a mission like this, one mistake could be fatal. Outside, the first rays of dawn were beginning to cut through the darkness. The SEALs could feel the tension building as the moment approached. Soon, they would leave the safety of the briefing room and enter a world where every sound could betray them and every shadow could hide danger. It was the kind of mission that separated the experienced from the inexperienced, the lucky from the doomed. But these SEALs were anything but inexperienced. They had been through similar operations, had faced impossible odds, and yet had always found a way through. Still, there was something different about this mission. The stakes felt higher, the enemy more prepared. Every member of the team felt a knot of nervous anticipation in their stomachs. Not fear exactly, but awareness. An understanding that they were about to enter a situation where the jungle itself could seem like an enemy, and where survival depended on sharp minds, steady hands, and complete trust in one another. Finally, the leader clicked the pointer one last time, closing the briefing. "Remember your training. Remember each other. Stay sharp. Stay alive." He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of every man and woman there. There was no room for hesitation, no room for doubt. Each of them nodded, silently acknowledging the responsibility they carried. They knew that what happened in the next few hours could change their lives forever. As they stood and slung their gear onto their shoulders, the weight of anticipation shifted into action. There was no turning back now. Outside, the helicopter blades would soon slice through the air, lifting them into the dense jungle where every step mattered and every second counted. The mission had begun. Even before they reached the enemy's territory, the tension, the focus, and the determination had already set the tone for what would be the most intense hours of their lives. The helicopter sliced through the pre-dawn sky, its rotors cutting the air with a rhythmic, almost hypnotic sound. Inside, the SEAL team was strapped in, their faces focused, eyes scanning the interior and occasionally flicking to the windows. Outside, the jungle stretched like an endless sea of green, thick and impenetrable, hiding every possible danger beneath its canopy. Every man and woman in that helicopter knew that once they left the aircraft, there would be no turning back. The descent was tense. The helicopter's shadow danced over the treetops below, and the team could see the dense vegetation waiting to swallow them. The landing zone was small, barely enough for the aircraft to touch down safely, and surrounded by uneven terrain. The pilot's voice came over the intercom, calm but clipped, "Touchdown in 60 seconds. Be ready." As the helicopter slowed, the team checked their gear one last time. Rifles, ammo, knives, communication devices, and survival kits were all secured. Every movement was precise, practiced. Their training had drilled these actions into muscle memory. Still, the weight of knowing that they were about to enter hostile territory made every second feel heavier. The moment the skids touched the ground, the team leapt out. The jungle greeted them with a mix of silence and subtle sounds. Rustling leaves, distant bird calls, and the faint snap of branches under unknown footsteps. Immediately, the SEALs spread out, taking defensive positions. Every sense was alert. The shadows between the trees seemed darker than usual, every rustle more menacing. In this environment, even a minor mistake could give away their position. They moved slowly, deliberately, each step calculated to avoid making noise. The jungle was unlike any training ground they had experienced back home. Vines tugged at their gear, thick roots threatened to trip them, and mud clung to their boots, making movement difficult. Sweat ran down their faces, not just from exertion, but from the tension of knowing that at any moment, they could be attacked. The leader signaled silently with his hand, and the team followed, weaving through the dense foliage. They relied on hand signals, body language, and subtle cues to communicate, avoiding any sound that might reach enemy ears. The jungle itself was a challenge. Paths were not clearly marked, and every turn could lead them into a trap. Their training had taught them to read the land, to anticipate danger, and to move as one. As they approached a narrow clearing, one of the SEALs paused. His trained eyes caught a flash of movement between the trees, a shadow, too quick to be a bird or an animal. He signaled to the leader, who quickly scanned the area and motioned the team to fan out. Their bodies pressed low to the ground, hearts racing. They had learned that in the jungle, even a small movement could hide deadly consequences. For hours, they moved cautiously, making slow progress toward the target. Each member relied not just on their training, but on instincts honed by countless missions. The jungle was alive, and they had to blend with it, using its natural cover while avoiding its hidden dangers. Snakes, insects, and uneven terrain were minor threats compared to the enemy waiting for them. The humidity was oppressive. Sweat soaked their clothes, and the air felt heavy and sticky. The heat made it difficult to breathe, yet every step forward was essential. Communication was minimal. A whisper could carry through the dense trees, so they used hand signals or simple nods to relay information. Despite the physical strain, mental alertness had to remain sharp. Any lapse could be fatal. They encountered natural obstacles that forced them to adapt constantly. A fallen tree blocked their path, requiring them to carefully climb over without making noise. A shallow stream crossed their route, and the sound of moving water threatened to mask or amplify other noises. Every moment was a delicate balance between speed and stealth. As they advanced, the SEALs also observed signs of the enemy: broken branches, footprints, and occasional scraps of discarded supplies. These small details told them the enemy was aware of possible intruders and that they would need to be even more careful. The sense of being hunted, even when no one was in sight, weighed heavily on the team. Despite the danger, there were moments of awe. Sunlight breaking through the canopy painted the jungle in gold and green. Birds called from high branches, and insects hummed around. It was a reminder that the jungle, though deadly, was also alive and beautiful. The contrast between the serenity of nature and the violence waiting just beyond each tree made the seals even more focused. By late afternoon, the team had covered a significant distance, but the jungle showed no signs of easing. Every path forward was uncertain, every clearing potentially deadly. The seals knew they were deep in enemy territory now, and the real challenge was just beginning. The mission that had started in a quiet briefing room was now a tense dance through the unknown, where survival depended on skill, patience, and complete trust in one another. Each member felt the weight of responsibility, not just for themselves but for their team and for the mission. The jungle had become a living opponent, testing them with every step, but they were trained to endure, adapt, and push forward. The sun was beginning to dip toward the horizon, and shadows lengthened, adding new challenges to their path. The seals moved with quiet determination, knowing that soon, the enemy would reveal themselves, and every lesson, every drill, every ounce of courage would be put to the ultimate test. The seals had been moving carefully for hours, the jungle's oppressive heat pressing down on them, every rustle and shadow keeping their senses on edge. The canopy above let in only slivers of light, making it hard to see far ahead. The air was thick with humidity, mixed with the earthy smell of wet soil and decaying leaves. It was quiet, too quiet, and that made the tension even more unbearable. Suddenly, the first shot rang out. The sharp crack of a rifle echoed through the trees, bouncing off trunks and branches. The seals immediately dropped to the ground, rifles raised, eyes scanning for the source. Their training took over instinctively. Within seconds, they were in defensive positions, communicating silently through hand signals, each member watching a specific sector. The jungle erupted around them. More gunfire came from multiple directions, catching them off guard. The enemy had clearly anticipated their approach and had laid an ambush. The seals pressed themselves against the ground, using every natural feature, the thick roots, fallen logs, and dense undergrowth for cover. Bullets whizzed past, kicking up dirt and sending leaves flying. The team leader's voice was calm but firm as he shouted orders over the chaos, directing movement, assigning targets, and keeping everyone coordinated. The seals had expected danger, but this was something else entirely. The enemy was not just firing randomly, they were strategic, well-trained, and positioned to maximize their advantage. Every path forward was covered, every possible escape route monitored. The team realized that without careful planning, they could be trapped. For a moment, the thought of being abandoned, cut off from command and support, flashed across their minds. They shook it off. Hesitation could cost lives. One of the seals, a sharpshooter, took careful aim and returned fire, taking out an enemy combatant hidden in the underbrush. Another laid suppressive fire to keep the attackers' heads down. Every shot was deliberate. There was no room for error. They had trained for ambushes, but nothing could completely prepare them for the stress of live combat. The way adrenaline surged through the body, sharpening focus but exhausting energy at the same time. The team moved cautiously, retreating to a slightly higher and safer position. They had to stay mobile. Staying in one place too long would make them easy targets. The jungle, which had seemed like an obstacle earlier, now became a battleground. Every tree could conceal an enemy, every shadow a sniper. The seals used the terrain, crawling under branches, sliding down muddy slopes, and positioning themselves behind thick trunks to minimize exposure. Communication was crucial. They couldn't risk making noise with radios, as the enemy could intercept or locate them. Instead, they relied on hand signals, subtle gestures, and eye contact to coordinate. Every movement had to be precise, every decision immediate. The seals had been through tough situations before, but the combination of dense jungle, limited visibility, and a well-prepared enemy made this one of the most dangerous operations of their careers. As the firefight continued, the seals realized they were running low on ammunition. Each bullet became precious, and every shot had to count. The enemy seemed to anticipate their actions, constantly shifting positions, forcing the team to adapt quickly. The adrenaline that had sharpened their senses at the start began to mix with fatigue. They were aware that extraction was impossible at the moment. The helicopter team could not reach them under heavy fire, and command couldn't provide support until the situation stabilized. The SEALs pressed on, moving in short bursts between cover points, returning fire when necessary, and keeping their formation tight. The jungle itself seemed to conspire with the enemy. Thick vines slowed movement, fallen trees blocked paths, and mud made every step a challenge. Despite this, the team maintained focus. Every member was hyper-aware of their surroundings, constantly scanning, listening, and calculating their next move. In a rare, quiet moment between bursts of gunfire, the team leader assessed the situation. They were outnumbered and outgunned in this ambush, but the enemy's strategy had gaps. Flanking routes, slightly weaker cover, and moments of hesitation. The team had to exploit these openings while staying alive. Each SEAL knew that panic could spread like wildfire, but trust in their training and in each other kept them steady. Time stretched on. Minutes felt like hours. The SEALs moved methodically, pushing the enemy back just enough to find temporary safe zones. But the enemy regrouped quickly, pressing the attack. The jungle echoed with the sounds of gunfire, shouted orders, and the occasional thud of someone hitting the ground. The SEALs had to stay calm under pressure, making every split-second decision count. Amid the chaos, one member noticed movement, a shadow darting between the trees, faster than any enemy they had seen. It was too precise, too purposeful to be random. At first, no one said anything, but the presence of a hidden shooter became clear as bullets began taking out key enemy positions without revealing a source. The SEALs' eyes widened in surprise. Could help really be here, unseen, turning the tide of a fight that had seemed hopeless? For now, though, they couldn't dwell on it. The firefight raged, bullets ricocheting off trees, leaves torn apart by the storm of combat. The SEALs pressed on, moving from cover to cover, focused on survival and completing the mission. Each member relied on every skill they had learned over years of training. Every sound mattered, every shadow had to be watched, and every decision could mean life or death. The team knew one thing clearly. They were deep in enemy territory, the odds were against them, and extraction was impossible. Survival depended entirely on their ability to stay sharp, stay coordinated, and keep pushing forward. The jungle, once just an obstacle, had now become a dangerous battlefield, testing not only their strength and skill, but their courage in the face of overwhelming odds. The firefight had slowed, but the SEALs could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on them. The jungle, once an obstacle to navigate, now felt like a trap, closing in from all sides. The sun was beginning to sink, sending long shadows through the trees and turning the dense foliage into a maze of darkness and uncertainty. Sweat ran down their faces, not just from exertion, but from the constant tension, the knowledge that a single mistake could be fatal. They huddled briefly behind a fallen tree, catching their breath and checking their equipment. Bullets were running low. Radios were still jammed by the thick jungle canopy. The thought that command might not be able to reach them for help made the team leader's jaw tighten. They were on their own. The reality hit hard. Without external support, survival was not guaranteed. Each member knew it, and the unspoken fear weighed on them all. The team leader scanned the area, eyes narrowing. "We need to move. Stay low, stay quiet, and keep together," he ordered, his voice calm but firm. He knew that panic could spread faster than bullets. If even one member faltered, the entire team could be compromised. The jungle around them was unforgiving, filled with uneven ground, thorny plants, and the constant threat of hidden enemies. They had to rely on training, instincts, and each other to survive. The team began to move again, each step deliberate and careful. The SEALs used hand signals to communicate, pointing out potential threats, indicating direction, and marking spots where cover was strong. Every rustle of leaves, every snapping branch made their hearts race, and every shadow seemed like an enemy ready to strike. The enemy wasn't just attacking, they were intelligent, strategic, and using the jungle to their advantage. As they advanced, fatigue started to creep in. Hours of running, crawling, and fighting had taken their toll. Muscles ached, energy drained quickly, and yet there was no time to rest. They moved in short bursts using fallen logs, large rocks, and dense undergrowth as temporary shields. The weight of their gear made movement even harder, but it was essential. Without weapons, communication devices, and survival supplies, they wouldn't last long in the jungle. One of the SEALs paused to check on a teammate who had taken a minor graze from an earlier shot. A quick patch, a silent nod, and they continued. There was no room for hesitation. They had trained for injuries, for exhaustion, and for extreme stress, but experiencing it in real life was something else entirely. Every breath felt heavy. Every heartbeat was amplified in the silence between enemy fire. The team's leader knew that the enemy was watching their movements, waiting for them to make a mistake. They had to stay unpredictable, moving in a way that kept the attackers off balance. At the same time, they had to conserve energy and ammunition. Every shot had to count. Every movement had to serve a purpose. The jungle was both a shield and a challenge, offering cover but hiding dangers at every turn. Despite the danger, the SEALs relied on small victories to keep morale up. Clearing a path through dense vines, spotting an enemy before being seen, or moving a few meters closer to their objective felt like triumphs in the midst of chaos. Each member reminded themselves why they were here: to complete the mission, protect their team, and survive. The stakes were high, and there was no turning back. As they pressed forward, the team began to notice subtle signs that the enemy was shifting positions. A faint rustle of leaves here, the snap of a twig there, indicated movement just beyond sight. The SEALs adjusted their formation, spreading out while maintaining communication. Their senses were razor-sharp. Every sound, every scent, every shadow was analyzed and interpreted. Survival depended on their ability to read the environment, predict enemy actions, and act decisively. The jungle, which had been a neutral setting, now felt like an active participant in the fight. Rain began to drizzle lightly, soaking the leaves and turning the ground into slippery mud. The weather added another layer of difficulty. Visibility dropped, footing became treacherous, and weapons became heavier in the wet conditions. Yet the team pushed on. They couldn't stop, not when lives and the mission itself depended on every movement. At a small clearing, the SEALs paused again, quickly assessing their situation. Supplies were critically low, exhaustion was mounting, and the enemy pressure had not lessened. The realization hit: without reinforcements, without help from above, they might not make it out alive. The jungle had pushed them to the edge, and the thought of being abandoned, cut off from extraction and support, was real. The leader looked at each member, seeing the same mixture of fear, determination, and focus reflected in their eyes. "We keep moving. We keep fighting. We survive. That's all there is to it," he said quietly, almost to himself as much as to the team. They nodded, drawing on training, trust, and sheer willpower to push forward. In that moment, the SEALs were not just soldiers. They were a single unit, each life intertwined with the other, each decision a matter of survival. As night began to fall, the jungle transformed. Shadows grew longer, sounds became distorted, and the unknown stretched in every direction. The SEALs knew that darkness would bring new challenges, but also opportunities to use stealth to their advantage. They had to adapt to the changing environment, remain alert, and keep moving. Every step, every breath, every heartbeat mattered. They pressed on, mentally calculating distance, anticipating danger, and keeping a careful balance between aggression and caution. Each moment in the jungle was a test of endurance, of courage, and of the bond between them. The mission was no longer just about objectives. It was about surviving the relentless pressure of being alone in enemy territory, surrounded by danger, and fighting against the odds. The SEALs moved forward into the deepening night, the jungle closing around them like a living, breathing entity. They were exhausted, outnumbered, and isolated. Yet they pushed on with unwavering determination. Each step brought them closer to their goal, and unknowingly closer to the moment that would change everything. The jungle had grown darker, the thick canopy above blotting out the last hints of fading light. Every sound seemed amplified, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of a bird, even the hum of insects. The seals moved cautiously, muscles tense, senses sharp. Every shadow felt like it could hide a threat. Every branch could conceal an enemy. The firefight earlier had left them shaken, yet their determination kept them pressing forward. They knew the mission was far from over, and the stakes had never been higher. Suddenly, a series of precise shots rang out from somewhere deep in the trees. The bullets struck with deadly accuracy, taking out enemy positions that had been threatening the seals only moments before. For a second, the team froze, listening, unsure where the fire was coming from. No one had called in support. No helicopter had arrived. And yet, the danger around them began to diminish. It was as if an invisible hand had intervened. The seals quickly realized what was happening. The enemy was being neutralized one, by someone they could not see. Bullets found their targets with uncanny precision, and the attackers began to falter, retreating behind trees and falling back into the jungle. The seals exchanged astonished glances. Could there really be someone out there, hidden, turning the tide of a fight that had seemed hopeless? The team leader motioned for them to move, and they advanced cautiously, using the brief moments of relief to regroup. Each step was calculated, each movement deliberate. They had to be careful. Even with this unexpected help, the jungle was still full of danger. Yet a spark of hope ignited within them. The impossible was happening. Someone or something was giving them a fighting chance. The hidden shooter worked with surgical precision. Every shot was deliberate, aimed at the enemy's most threatening positions. Branches snapped silently underfoot as the team moved closer, but the sniper's cover remained unbroken. The SEALs realized that this was no ordinary ally. The skill and timing of the shooter suggested extensive training and knowledge of the terrain. Whoever this was, they had been watching the enemy for a long time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As the SEALs cautiously advanced, they noticed the enemy starting to scatter. Confusion was spreading among the attackers. The once relentless ambush had turned into a retreat. The jungle, which had been alive with danger, now echoed with the sounds of the enemy scrambling to regroup. The hidden shooter's precision had shifted the balance of power. The SEALs were no longer merely surviving. They were gaining an opportunity to regain control. The leader of the SEALs motioned for a temporary stop, allowing the team to assess the situation. Each member took a moment to reload, catch their breath, and glance around. Even in these tense moments, they couldn't help but marvel at the skill of the unseen marksman. The relief was tempered by caution. They still didn't know who the shooter was, and revealing themselves too early could endanger everyone. The SEALs moved strategically, advancing in a tight formation, covering each other as they went. The hidden shooter's support created openings in the enemy lines, and the team seized these opportunities with practiced efficiency. Each shot they fired now had a purpose beyond mere survival. They were reclaiming control of the battlefield. The jungle, once a prison, was slowly becoming a stage where they could fight back. Hours seemed to stretch into an eternity as the SEALs and the hidden shooter worked in tandem, though unknowingly. The enemy, disoriented and shaken, began to retreat further into the jungle. Their ambush, which had almost trapped the SEALs, was crumbling under the weight of this unseen precision fire. The team's confidence began to rise, tempered by the constant awareness that the fight was far from over. At one point, the SEALs caught a fleeting glimpse of movement through the trees. It was quick, a shadow vanishing almost as soon as it appeared, but it confirmed their suspicion. The hidden shooter was close, observing them as carefully as they were observing the enemy. Every shot, every movement was calculated, and the SEALs began to trust that their mysterious ally knew exactly what they were doing. Despite the assistance, the jungle remained treacherous. Roots, vines, and uneven ground slowed movement, forcing the team to balance speed with caution. They moved silently, communicating only through hand signals and nods. The hidden shooter had created a lifeline for them, but survival still required focus, discipline, and teamwork. The adrenaline coursing through their veins helped, but exhaustion was beginning to settle in. With the enemy's pressure easing, the SEALs took a brief moment to regroup, and for the first time since entering the jungle, they allowed themselves a sense of cautious optimism. The tide of the battle had shifted. The hidden shooter had not only saved them from immediate danger but had given them a chance to reclaim the initiative. The impossible had happened. The seals, once trapped and on the verge of being overrun, now had hope. The team leader's eyes scanned the surrounding jungle, searching for any clue of the mysterious shooter. He had trained for every possible scenario, yet this was unlike anything he had encountered. Who was this person? How had they remained hidden for so long? And most importantly, could they trust them? For now, the answers remained a mystery. What mattered was that the battle was turning in their favor, and every step forward was a step toward survival. The hidden shooter remained unseen, a silent guardian in the shadows. Their skill, patience, and timing had shifted the battle from desperation to possibility. The seals pressed on, moving cautiously but with renewed determination, knowing that the jungle was still dangerous, but that an invisible ally had appeared just when they needed it most. The moment was tense, thrilling, and full of possibility, marking a turning point in a mission that had teetered on the edge of disaster. The hidden shooter had done the impossible. The enemy, once relentless and overwhelming, was now retreating, their organized ambush crumbling under the precise fire from someone the seals could not see. The team leader signaled to move forward, and the seals advanced carefully, pressing the advantage while still wary of hidden dangers. The jungle that had seemed so oppressive now offered opportunities, cover, pathways, and elevated ground that could be used strategically. Every step was measured. The seals moved in tight formation, eyes scanning every shadow, every movement, every flicker of light that could signal danger. The adrenaline that had kept them alive during the ambush still pulsed through their veins, but now it was combined with a cautious hope. They had survived the worst of the attack, and the mysterious shooter had given them a chance to turn the battle around. The team had to be strategic. They couldn't simply rush forward. The jungle was unpredictable, and the enemy could still regroup or strike from unexpected positions. They moved from cover to cover, using fallen logs, thick foliage, and natural depressions in the ground to shield themselves. Each seal had a sector to watch, and every sound, from a snapped twig to the rustle of leaves, was analyzed for threat. The enemy's disorganization worked to the seals' advantage. Their retreating movements created gaps and weaknesses in their lines, and the team's sharpshooters took these opportunities to eliminate isolated threats. The hidden shooter, still unseen, continued to strike with perfect timing, taking out key enemy positions and allowing the seals to move safely through the previously dangerous territory. Every shot brought a sense of relief, but also a renewed awareness of how close they had come to disaster. As they advanced, the team's confidence grew, tempered by caution. They realized that they were beginning to control the battlefield, even deep in enemy territory. The jungle that had been so threatening now seemed to bend in their favor, as if their unseen ally had not only eliminated immediate threats, but also guided them through safer paths. The seals moved with purpose, not just reacting to danger, but actively shaping the course of the encounter. The leader signaled a brief stop to reassess. The team huddled behind a fallen tree, weapons ready, breaths heavy but controlled. They quickly scanned their surroundings and took note of the remaining enemy positions. The jungle, dense as ever, still held potential dangers, but the seals could see now where their path lay. The tide had truly shifted. Communication remained subtle. Hand signals, eye contact, and nods were all that was needed. The seals had become a single, well-coordinated unit, responding to the environment and to each other seamlessly. They moved silently, fluidly, like shadows themselves, pressing the advantage while keeping a constant watch for any hidden threats. The hidden shooter's support had given them the confidence to act aggressively, but they knew better than to underestimate the enemy. The enemy, disoriented and fearful after losing their key positions, attempted to regroup, but the seals anticipated their moves. Each step forward was calculated, every action purposeful. The team had been tested in the harshest of circumstances, but now their skill, teamwork, and the unseen support of the hidden shooter allowed them to regain control. The balance of power had shifted, and the once dominant enemy was now on the defensive. As they moved deeper into the jungle, the SEALs encountered signs of the enemy's panic. Abandoned weapons, broken branches, and hastily discarded supplies. The evidence told them that the tide of the battle had truly turned. The SEALs were no longer merely surviving, they were advancing with purpose, reclaiming territory that had seemed impossible to take just hours earlier. The jungle, once a confining obstacle, now became a stage for their tactical skill. The hidden shooter continued to operate silently. Each precise shot created openings, weakened the enemy's defenses, and allowed the SEALs to move safely. The team exchanged glances, acknowledging the impact of this unseen ally without speaking. The jungle echoed with the sounds of retreating enemies, and for the first time since the mission began, the SEALs felt a real sense of momentum. They were no longer on the edge of disaster. They were fighting to dominate the battlefield. Despite the improvement in their situation, caution remained paramount. The jungle was unpredictable. The enemy could still strike unexpectedly, and exhaustion weighed heavily on the team. They moved with deliberate care, always using cover, always scanning, always communicating silently. The rhythm of the jungle, the rustle of leaves, the distant calls of animals, the crack of twigs underfoot, was a constant reminder that danger could appear at any moment. The SEALs pressed forward, each step bringing them closer to reclaiming full control of the area. The hidden shooter's presence remained a mystery, yet their impact was undeniable. The team leader signaled for them to continue advancing slowly, methodically, taking advantage of every opportunity the battlefield presented. The jungle, once a symbol of fear and danger, now offered a path forward. By nightfall, the SEALs had regained significant control. The enemy had retreated further, disorganized and hesitant to engage. The SEALs took a moment to regroup, catch their breath, and reload. The hidden shooter had not yet revealed themselves, but their effectiveness had changed the course of the mission. The team was alive, stronger, and ready to continue. The tide had been turned, and the SEALs were no longer on the brink. They were in command of their fate. With careful steps, quiet signals, and unwavering focus, the SEALs moved deeper into the jungle. Every member knew that the hidden shooter had saved their lives and changed the course of the mission. They pressed forward with renewed determination, ready to face whatever challenges still lay ahead. For the first time since the ambush, hope mixed with their determination. The mission, which had begun in the shadow of disaster, now had a real chance of success. The jungle was alive with the sounds of the retreating enemy. Branches snapping under hurried footsteps, shouts and curses carried through the dense trees, and the occasional clatter of dropped weapons. The SEALs moved cautiously but with a renewed sense of purpose. After hours of firefights, exhaustion weighed heavily on their bodies, but adrenaline and the knowledge that the tide had turned gave them energy. They had survived the ambush, and now the next question burned in their minds. Who was the hidden shooter who had saved them? The team leader motioned for a short halt. The SEALs crouched behind thick foliage, catching their breath and surveying the jungle around them. Every sense was alert, scanning for movement. Yet there was no sign of the mysterious marksman. No shadow, no noise, nothing to indicate where this unseen ally might be. It was almost unreal. How could someone be so precise, so skilled, and so hidden? Every shot that had fallen in the last hour had been deliberate, intelligent, and life-saving. One of the SEALs, a young sniper named Harris, whispered to the leader, "Sir, whoever that is, they saved us. I've never seen shots that clean in the jungle." They were in perfect position the entire time. The leader nodded, understanding the same thought. This was no ordinary person. This was someone with experience, training, and intimate knowledge of the terrain. Someone who had been waiting for the right moment to act. The team decided to move forward carefully, tracking the enemy's retreat. Every step was calculated, the SEALs advancing as a single unit, covering each other while using the jungle to their advantage. The enemy's scattered positions made it easier to clear the area, but the jungle was still full of dangers. Even after the ambush had been neutralized, the SEALs knew they couldn't relax completely. Every rustle of leaves, every distant sound, could still be a threat. As they moved, small signs began to emerge, subtle footprints off the beaten path, faint broken branches that didn't match the enemy's retreat, and areas where the underbrush seemed to have been disturbed in a precise pattern. It was almost as if someone had been guiding them, not with words, but by controlling the battlefield from the shadows. The team leader's eyes narrowed, piecing together the puzzle. They had been led through the jungle in a way that maximized safety, avoiding hidden traps and ambush points that could have cost them dearly. Hours passed, and the seals finally approached a small clearing near a riverbank. There, crouched low and partially hidden by the foliage, was a figure. The team froze momentarily, hands on weapons. This was the moment of truth. The hidden shooter had been watching them all along, remaining unseen, perfectly concealed even as the seals advanced through enemy territory. The figure slowly rose and stepped into the open. It was a local operative, someone the seals had never encountered before. A woman, wearing camouflage, her face smeared with mud and sweat, and her eyes sharp and alert, stood before them. She had been tracking the insurgents for months, moving silently through the jungle, and waiting for the precise moment to strike. Her knowledge of the terrain, combined with extraordinary sharpshooting skills, had made her an invisible savior. The seals stared, a mix of surprise, admiration, and relief washing over them. The leader lowered his weapon slightly, and for a moment words were unnecessary. Harris finally broke the silence. You saved us. All of us. How? He asked, awe in his voice. The woman, calm but weary, explained. She had been monitoring the insurgent camp for weeks, learning their patterns and predicting their movements. When the seals had been ambushed, she had been ready, covering their positions, neutralizing key threats, and creating the openings that allowed the team to survive and push forward. Every shot had been deliberate, every movement calculated, and every second timed perfectly to ensure the seals could continue. The team leader finally spoke, his voice steady but filled with gratitude. We owe our lives to you. You came at the right moment, and without you, this mission would have been over before it even began. The woman gave a small nod, acknowledging their words without arrogance. Her mission had been to neutralize threats and protect those who were not aware of her presence. Recognition was secondary. Survival and success were primary. As the seals regrouped, they felt a renewed sense of purpose. The hidden shooter had not only saved their lives, but had shown them the value of unexpected allies and the importance of trust, even in the most dangerous situations. The jungle, which had been a deadly maze, now seemed less threatening with their ally by their side. For the first time since the mission began, the seals allowed themselves a moment to breathe, to assess the situation, and to acknowledge the skill and courage of the operative who had changed the course of events. She had not only turned the tide of a fight that seemed hopeless but had done so with absolute precision, remaining unseen and unpredictable. Her presence reinforced a truth the seals had always known. Sometimes, survival depended on the skill of others, on teamwork beyond the immediate team, and on courage that didn't require recognition. The team leader extended his hand to the operative. Welcome to the team, if you'll have us, he said with a rare smile. The operative smiled back faintly, a small sign of camaraderie in the midst of a long and grueling mission. They were still deep in the jungle, still facing danger, but now they had not only survived a near-fatal ambush, but had gained a formidable ally whose presence promised that the mission could succeed. Together, the seals and the hidden shooter pressed forward, moving as one unit. The enemy had been weakened, the jungle's threats had been navigated successfully, and hope had returned to the team. They were alive, prepared, and more determined than ever to complete the mission. What had seemed impossible hours earlier was now within reach, all thanks to the skill, courage, and timing of the mysterious operative who had remained unseen until the perfect moment. The jungle was quiet now, but it wasn't the calm of peace. It was the tense silence that comes after a storm. The enemy had retreated, disorganized and disheartened, leaving the seals and their unexpected ally in control of the area. Exhaustion weighed on every member of the team, muscles burning from hours of movement, firing, and vigilance. Yet there was a different kind of energy now, a sense of accomplishment, relief, and renewed determination. They had survived the ambush, turned the tide of battle, and gained the upper hand. The team leader gathered everyone for a quick assessment. Weapons were checked, ammunition counted, and injuries examined. Minor cuts and bruises were tended to, but nothing was life-threatening. The hidden shooter, still remaining mostly silent, surveyed the area with sharp eyes, noting any remaining threats or unusual signs in the jungle. Her presence had been critical, and the SEALs now fully understood just how much she had influenced the mission's outcome. The next step was extraction. The helicopters would arrive at a designated clearing, but the journey there was not without risk. The jungle was vast and unpredictable, and there was always a chance of encountering enemy stragglers or hidden traps. The team moved carefully, using the cover of trees and underbrush to advance. Every member of the SEAL team had grown accustomed to moving silently and coordinating through hand signals, and now the hidden shooter integrated seamlessly into their formation. As they approached the extraction point, the sound of distant rotors began to hum through the thick canopy. Relief spread quietly among the team. The helicopters were on schedule, and soon they would be lifted out of this unforgiving environment. But they couldn't relax yet. The clearing was exposed, and approaching it without caution could be dangerous. Each SEAL scanned the perimeter, checking for signs of movement and ensuring the landing zone was clear of ambushes. The hidden shooter moved with the same calculated precision she had shown throughout the mission. She took positions that maximized cover and visibility, providing a final protective layer as the team advanced. Every step of the way, the SEALs felt safer knowing that someone with unmatched skill and knowledge of the terrain was watching their backs. The jungle, which had seemed like an enemy, now became a corridor to safety, guided by her unseen hand. When they reached the clearing, the helicopters descended carefully, skimming over the treetops before touching down. The team moved quickly and efficiently, weapons slung and gear secured, maintaining awareness even as they approached safety. The hidden shooter stayed slightly behind, covering their advance until finally, the team leader gave the nod for her to move toward extraction as well. The sound of the helicopter blades grew louder, almost deafening in the stillness of the jungle. Dust and leaves were kicked up, but the team remained composed. One by one, they boarded the aircraft, the sense of danger gradually lifting as the rotors began to spin them away from the dense forest below. The hidden shooter followed closely, taking her place among the SEALs. Finally, the entire team was on board, and the helicopters lifted off, leaving the jungle behind. As the aircraft climbed higher, the SEALs took a moment to breathe. Some slumped in their seats, exhausted but alive. Others stared out the windows, watching the vast green expanse of the jungle shrink beneath them. The weight of the mission, the danger, and the relief of survival all settled on them simultaneously. The hidden shooter, sitting quietly among them, allowed herself a rare moment of relaxation, the tension in her muscles easing just slightly. Back at base, the team was greeted with the kind of quiet respect that only comes from survival against impossible odds. Debriefings would follow, reports would be written, and medals might be awarded. But in that moment, what mattered most was that everyone had made it out alive. The SEALs and their hidden ally had turned what could have been a disaster into a triumph. The story of the hidden shooter quickly spread through the ranks. Her presence had been unrecorded, unknown to command, but the SEALs' accounts were enough to cement her reputation. They spoke of her precision, her courage, and her ability to remain unseen while decisively changing the course of a life-or-death situation. The jungle, which had been a theater of chaos, became a testament to the skill, bravery, and teamwork of those who had survived it. The SEALs took a moment to acknowledge her, each nod, smile, or brief handshake carrying unspoken gratitude. She had not only saved their lives but had ensured the success of the mission. It was a reminder that in warfare, heroes often appear where they are least expected, and their impact can be monumental. The hidden shooter had been the turning point, the unseen guardian who transformed despair into hope. Even as the helicopters flew back toward base, the team began to reflect on what had happened. They talked quietly among themselves about the ambush, the enemy's tactics, and the way their unseen ally had appeared just at the right moment. The mission, which had started with a sense of foreboding and danger, ended in survival, teamwork, and respect for the unexpected hero. By the time they landed back at the base, night had fallen completely. The jungle was far behind them, replaced by the familiar structures and lights of the camp. The SEALs disembarked, carrying the weight of fatigue, but also the pride of having completed an impossible mission. The hidden shooter followed, her role now recognized and respected. Together, they had survived, together they had succeeded, and together they had shown that courage, skill, and timing could turn even the most desperate situation into a story of triumph. As the night settled over the base, the SEALs and their ally knew that they had not just completed a mission. They had survived one of the most dangerous operations of their careers. The jungle had tested them to their limits. The enemy had almost overpowered them, and yet, with trust, skill, and the aid of a mysterious but skilled shooter, they had emerged victorious. The story of that day would be told for years, a testament to bravery, precision, and the unseen forces that sometimes tip the balance between life and death.